The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
A tradition as old as time. The in-person show for the CJ Show. What's up, buddy?
Good to see you.
Great to see you. You look amazing. For those who are not watching on YouTube, CJ is wearing this incredible purple suit down to the purple tie. The poppy's also there too. I want that suit.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I have a purple suit. I want that one.
Well, I'm heading after this to a Hall of Fame luncheon.
Fancy.
Where the media members that are inducted to the Hall of Fame this week, including Scott Burnside, a good friend of mine, formally make their speeches and get their jackets and the like. So I had to dress for the occasion, and I'm seeing you too, so that's a bonus.
I don't know if I'm that deserving of a suit like that. You're incredible, CJ. We definitely need to touch off on. Okay, we need to address these buzzers that are here. It wasn't intentional for us to have buzzers. We just decided they've become part of our show today.
Well, they're the SDP guys, so I love coming to the studio because it literally is like walking into the basement of like a child's playroom. There's just toys everywhere and figurines, and in this case, there's some buzzers too. And every time I come, there's something new. They also have lots of candy here. It really
They do have candy here all the time.
It would be like if you let a 12-year-old basically decorate the studio. That's what I feel like the vibe is in this place.
It's basically like there's all these rise in content creators on TikTok and Twitch and all that, and they're starting to have their own kind of mansions and houses where you can record and do all this cool stuff in these studios. You can also sleep there. Like the SDPN House. I don't know if we have a formal name for it. The SDPN House very much is that vibe.
They could have their own reality show. The SDPN.
Would you watch an SDPN reality show with like Steve, Jesse, and Adam?
Imagine they had to live together 24 hours a day.
Who would break first? Adam would break first. Adam would break first. The conditions are not conducive for a rich persona like he is.
Yes.
No, he would call his mom immediately. He would call his mother immediately. Steve, I think, would try to find a way to keep the peace. Jesse would find a way to find the best in any situation. Like, if something bad were to happen, he would have all the available resources to make it work. I'm convinced of that. Jesse would be the even cool dude in all this. Adam would break first. Steve would just be there just like, we're all going to get along just fine, maybe. Hopefully.
Do you know what? There was a show, this will predate you, called The Lofters. And when I was in first year university, basically, literally, someone bought a loft in Toronto.
Yes.
And they just like made people live there, and there was just cameras going all the time. And so like we would sit in like our residence and like, I don't know if we're like having a beer or whatever. And we would just like watch, we would just like call it up on a screen and just like watch them hanging out.
So the Lofters sounds like the English equivalent of Occupation Double, which is like a big show in Quebec where the premise I think is exactly the same, where you just have all these like people living in a loft.
And that's where Jennifer Hedger got her start.
Yes. I was about to say for the English. Yes.
I think it was called Lofters. Anyway, it was
I just Googled it. U8TV The Lofters.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking of in my head is that we just have cameras everywhere in here and they have to live together and we can just watch them at all times. Like they didn't produce, you know what I mean? They didn't market it down into a 30-minute a week show or anything.
No.
It just was like all the time. You could just watch them at any point.
If you want to watch your favorite members of the SDPN at any time you want, let us know in the comments. We will find a way to do that. Anyway, we will touch off on Hockey Hall of Fame weekend. We have to talk about hockey on this podcast.
No, I know. We're just like minutes in and we have not even referenced sports.
That's okay. That's all right. The people who watch the show and listen to the show understand that we go on these tangents. That's fine. I do want to talk about the Winnipeg Jets, the best team in hockey, off to the best start ever, 14-1. How did they do it? How did they get to this point where they became the best team in hockey as good as they've been? What have you seen from this team?
I was going to say, I could give like the snarky answer, which is they have scored the most goals. They've allowed the fewest. They have a 41% efficiency on their power play.
I deserve that answer.
No, I'm not. But it's not. I'm not being snarky with you. But
no,
like
I know.
How they've done it is like they've literally just been the best team. What's interesting about the few things about their start that stand out to me, they've had a pretty soft schedule.
Ooh, that is an interesting thing to say off the top. They have a soft schedule.
Well, but I'm not taking anything away from them,
right?
Because you still got to win the games.
Yeah, absolutely.
And lots of good teams lose to teams that we would call bad teams. every night in the league. It does happen. I mean, even bad teams are going to win at least 4 out of 10 of their games. So the margins aren't that big. But Winnipeg has had a pretty soft schedule. They've played more home games. But what's really interesting of where they're at now is now it turns hard. 9 of their next 10 games are against teams that were in the playoffs last year. 9 of 10 are on the road, starting with a game at Madison Square Garden on Tuesday. And so I think this will be, let's circle back at December 1st when they play these next 10 games and see where they're at. Again, I'm not forecasting they're going to lose 8 of them.
Right.
But I just think that the water will find its level a little bit more at that point in time. But in the meantime, obviously, we got to give credit where it's due. 100%. I mean, the beauty about this is that it's not been one line, or it's not all been Connor Hellebuck being awesome, although he's been pretty awesome. He just had that shutout streak of 100 and something minutes.
Yeah.
Just ended over the weekend there. They've just, it feels like a team where truly they're just getting a little bit more out of the players that have been there. And I think we should remember they were 4th overall in the league last year in the regular season. Like a lot of that gets overshadowed because they lose in 5 games in round 1, and that's what sticks in your memory. But their truest test of who the best teams are, I mean, the cup goes to the team that wins 16 starting in mid-April, right? But the truest test of who the best teams are 82 games, I think. And so over 82 games last year, the Jets were unquestionably one of the best teams in the league. And so probably we shouldn't be so surprised. But, I mean, no one expects to win 14 out of 15, that being said. So, I don't know if I struck the right amount of optimism here because, I mean, it's such an awesome start, and I'm worried that I'm like, wow, their schedule hasn't been that, like I'm listing all these buts. But, I mean, man, they went and won all those games, and, they've been pretty impressive too. Like they beat Dallas, a good team, over the weekend. They beat Colorado before that. They've kind of kept it rolling here, and so maybe they'll come through these 10 games. They'll go 8-2 over this stretch, and then we're going to be like, wow, these are world beaters.
I was about to push back with the wins over Colorado and Dallas. Like, that's fair. The first few games maybe a bit easier. Just having the schedule up in front of me, they beat an Edmonton team, which I did say they would go through a bit of a lull to start the year.
Then they beat them 6-0 in the first game.
They beat them 6-0 in that first game. Chicago's in there. Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota has been... Kirill Kaprizov, we'll get to him later. He's been amazing this year. Minnesota, San Jose's in there, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Seattle's in there, Calgary's in there.
A lot of teams that didn't play playoff games last year. That's all I'm saying.
Correct, yes. But I think the fact that they were able to get wins over a team like Tampa, who's also in there, Colorado's in there, Dallas is in there. I think we believe in Utah on this podcast. I don't know if they might absolutely be a playoff team, but I think we believe in them at least as a team that's on the up. I don't know how we feel about that now, maybe recently, but at least they had a good start to their season. But Utah's in there too. I mean, sure, there are some easier teams, but the Jets beat some good teams to get to this point. Absolutely.
And they've won 14 out of 15 games.
That is an insane start for them.
I guess I just would be a little nervous about so much going so well early in the year.
That's what I want to get to next. You
know what I mean? And it's not like a fault, but like there really is only one way to go from here next, right? Like you're not going to win at this rate. I mean, if they do, if they win 70 games this season, but at some point, there's going to be that word every team likes to use, adversity.
Adversity.
Which comes in the shape of many things. Some of your best players playing poorly, injuries, bad luck, a power play that goes cold, a penalty kill that goes cold. I mean, all these things can change things up. But yeah, look, they've had an awesome start. As I said, they were one of the best teams last year. So if they end up being one of the best teams this year, we shouldn't be that surprised. And ultimately, like a lot of teams in the league, unfortunately, their season will probably be defined by the playoffs.
Especially the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah. Well, I think, like they're sort of like where the Maple Leafs are, where the Bruins are. Like some of these teams that, the Bruins at least have had more success, but like they haven't really had the success in the playoffs they'd want. And it's not the first year that they've been a good regular season team. So it's almost like, I don't want to say you don't watch the next 60 games because that's not probably right either. But
did you say the Leafs have had more success than the Jets?
No, the Bruins. Because I just threw them in as off the top of my head.
I thought I heard Bruins and
even
Leafs.
Teams like Hurricanes, who've obviously won a whole bunch of round ones, but haven't really gone on too many long runs. I know they were in the Eastern Conference Final too. But like those teams that ultimately were like, can they get over the hump? But I think it's sort of that year in Winnipeg. I was happy to see, by the way, we haven't gotten their attendance much this season, but
that was another question I wanted to bring up.
They did sell out on the weekend.
That's good.
And the numbers are actually trending in a positive direction from last year early.
That's good.
Now, I don't know if they're quite selling as many tickets as they ultimately feel they need to. But the fact, it's good to see that the people are responding to this kind of start, and they're able to fill their building. Yeah,
so much to unpack from that, but I do want to start with that start. Just in recent history has told us that you could be the absolute best team in the league. You could try to be as dominant as you can over the regular season. And we have seen, again, in recent years, Boston sticks to mind. Tampa, a couple years earlier, sticks to mind too. You could have this absolutely amazing team go through the regular season. It just does not matter. That's what it feels like. I see this Winnipeg Jets team, and I see their start, and I see the fans against Dallas chanting U.S. backup at Jake Ottinger, and it's a great time to be a Winnipeg Jets fan. But having seen, again, in recent years, how the best team of the regular season has been, part of me is just thinking, well, why are we going to get hyped up for this team when some random third or fourth seed's going to find a way to win it? Like, maybe it's a bit pessimistic to think of it that way, but like, that's the big worry I have with the Winnipeg Jets. Can they find a way to be wire to wire the best team throughout this NHL season? Which I think would be, it's happened before. Absolutely, it's happened before, but it would make it very impressive if they find a way to do it this year.
Sure. Well, and they look at the first, like they're through the first leg of the journey, 15 games. But 100%. I mean, we can't even say they're going to be wire to wire because, as I mentioned, like this next stretch is legit difficult on their schedule. It's a stretch that they would have identified even before this start as like, wow, we really got to get through November because it's going to be tough. I think of the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013. I can't remember. They went 24 games, I think, to start the season without a regulation loss.
21-0-3.
There you go. And then they won the cup that year. So that ended up being, that was a shortened season after the 12-13 lockout. So maybe it was easier. I mean, not easy, but you know what I mean? It wasn't the full thing. The truth is, like, I think it's all about how fans, or the way we sort of frame the sport. It's so hard to win a Stanley Cup. Like, you need luck. Obviously, you need great players, and you need, but there is an element of luck. Maybe it's in terms of the matchups you get, who gets beat out somewhere else, who gets injured at when. As I said, I think the regular season is actually a better measure of who the best teams are. But we don't really celebrate the President's Trophy. I mean, some teams don't even want to
start a whole discussion.
But some teams don't even want to talk about it. A whole discussion
that, like, I don't know if. Do you want to go into a discussion about how I feel the regular season's been made meaningless?
You're a soccer fan, so I assume.
Yeah, I hate the fact that the NHL's regular season is meaningless. And I hate the fact that whenever you mention that it is meaningless and you should make some changes to make it more meaningful, people are just like, who cares? It's all about the Stanley Cup. Who cares?
Well,
if we're going to watch 82 games of a team, why not make it more interesting? Why not make it something worthwhile for people to, again, you could.
But how do you do that? Because the truth is the playoffs are awesome.
100%.
So if you start that the playoffs are awesome, I mean, how do you make the regular season also awesome?
I don't know. It's something that's going to have to just change with time. I don't think it's something you could just do instantaneously. Like the NBA, when they had that in-season tournament starting last year, that's an attempt, and I know the Lakers won that tournament. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but like, I don't know. Maybe you just keep building it, and maybe you just hope the games in that tournament end up being interesting, and then you go from there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a soccer fan, so like I'm used to the idea that a team will play through the Premier League as an example, and at the end of the year, they win a big prestigious trophy, and that trophy means something. But also, with all these other teams going through other different competitions, you don't have to win the big Premier League at the end of the day. A big win for you could be, if you're a lowly team, you could win like a League Cup, and that's considered a successful season for you.
Well, frankly,
but again, that takes time. That's not something you just change in a culture of a league like immediately.
But it's the nature of the game too, right?
100%.
Because the problem is, I feel like a bad team beats a good team in hockey more often than a bad team beats a good team in soccer.
Yeah, sure, and when it happens in soccer, it's the most amazing thing. Like when Leicester City won.
It's because it's sort of rare, though.
It's absolutely rare. Like when
imagine
Leicester
you
City
cheer
won,
for like is Burnley bad?
Burnley's not in like the Big Six or anything.
But if you're like Burnley and then like Man City comes and you beat them, you're probably
it's the biggest thing.
Exactly. But if like you're a Sharks fan right now, and the Sharks have actually been winning some games, so maybe that's
5-2 in their last 7.
But they were near historically bad last season.
Yeah, they.
So I'm just saying though, if they had a win against Florida, it's just not the same thing. Like
It isn't.
on any given night that happens, right? Like
Absolutely. It's just for me. I don't want anything to really change with the playoffs. I guess beyond seeding. I guess I mean people would love to have the 1-8-2-7 back. Like I'm okay with it being back, but you don't really need to do anything with the playoffs. And the Stanley Cup is still this amazing trophy.
We need 1-8 back.
Sure. Yes, we have made that point on the show. Yes, fine.
I just want to make sure it's clear that I'm like underlining that with highlighter.
Yeah.
Putting a little smack on it here.
Yeah, CJ, can you let us know how you feel about the current playoff format? Just hit the button.
It's November, so I can't get too fired up about it, but I really don't. I'm over the divisional thing.
Hit the button. Let us know how you feel. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I'm cool with 1-8 being back, 2-7, 3-6. But all that to say, the Stanley Cup is the Stanley Cup. It's still the best trophy you can win in professional sports. And I'm cool with it largely being as it is. But, I think it would be cool if we ever got to a point where winning the President's Trophy meant something. Having regular season success.
I just want to hear a team actually kind of be proud of it. So often like the team wins the President's Trophy, like, yeah, but the real job's still to come.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're like immediately on to the next thing.
Yeah, I don't know when we'll get to that. Something's going to have to change systemically within the culture of the NHL to get to that point, and I don't know if it's going to happen.
We're raging against the machine, man. I don't think it's changing.
Amazing band, by the way. I should mention, we did touch off on Connor Hellebuck. If you had to give MVP votes right now, you'd give him an MVP vote? I would.
I trust you. I honestly haven't looked at it.
I mean,
I haven't conceptualized it.
11 wins, 1 loss, 1.83 GAA. 9.35 save percentage.
I mean, it's pretty compelling, and he's his team's won 14 out of 15 games.
Like,
so.
I don't know. I think he's been the best reason why they've gotten there. I know Kyle Connor's been really good. Mark Scheifele's been good.
I mean, Nathan McKinnon's probably getting some votes.
Nathan McKinnon is definitely going to get himself some votes because he's put the Colorado Avalanche on his back.
Right. Kaprizov, as you mentioned, has had a
dollar
great
bill
start to the season. But it's way too soon to be giving out MVP votes.
I mean, absolutely it is, but I mean. No, it's not.
I just felt like we can't have an honest debate about this yet. It's too soon.
When is U.S. Thanksgiving again?
I think it's end of the month, 28th or something.
November 28th. You'll be ready by then to look at who's in the playoff spot and who isn't?
Yes. Okay. But even that's still a couple weeks away.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I don't even have my Christmas tree up yet.
I thought you did.
No, it's mentally it's up.
But you're like the Christmas man. I thought you would have had that up already.
I had some Christmas tunes blaring on the weekend at home.
Yeah,
it's not too soon for me is all I'm saying.
Yeah, you're already playing Band-Aid by now. Do they know it's Christmas time at all? That's your jam.
I didn't hear that one yet. But I do go to the Spotify sort of like the Rocky Christmas. I don't know what they call it, but
Rocky Christmas.
Like so it's not like traditional like what I listened to as a kid. It's like like the Justin Bieber Christmas songs come up. The Christmas Tree Farm by Taylor Swift.
Wait, what? Christmas Tree Farm? Are we allowed?
No, we can't play music, but I can hum music.
But can he hum it, Jesse?
Yes.
Producer Jesse, can he hum it? Okay, we got the thumbs up from producer Jesse. You can hum it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interpretive dance, but yeah.
Interpretive dance. I'm not a Swiftie. Don't come at me, please. I'm not a Swiftie,
Can't
so I don't know
saying that in Toronto right now.
Yeah, well, so like the concert is when?
Well, there's 6 of them.
There's 6 of them?
This week and next week.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
There's
Oilers,
6 of them?
The Oilers play a road game against the Leafs next Saturday, November 16th, and some of the traveling media couldn't come to cover the game because the hotels were so expensive.
Oh my God.
And Ryerson,
you know what? I heard about this for one.
Toronto Metropolitan University, Ryerson, Old Habits Die Hard was the school I went to.
Right.
They had to cancel some sports events because the teams coming in had nowhere to stay, essentially. Like the city is being taken over by the Swifties.
Isn't Kansas City and Buffalo supposed to play each other fairly soon? I had watched like an episode of the Dan Patrick Show where they were trying to make this connection that the schedule makers for the NFL definitely took into account Taylor Swift's concert schedule.
Oh.
And I mean, I need to double check this for myself, but I think Kansas City and Buffalo are supposed to play each other relatively soon, and it's supposed to coincide essentially with the fact that Taylor Swift's in Toronto. Case in point, Sunday, November 17th. Kansas City, Buffalo, in Buffalo.
I mean, why wouldn't they?
I mean, yeah.
The NFL is benefiting from this association. So
that's it. Anyway, I love this. The fact that it's an in-person show, we're just going off on all these different tangents. Was there anything else about Winnipeg you wanted to mention before I moved on?
No, but I hope I was not a downer because I'm actually.
No, I don't think.
I think it's a really great story. It's
No.
just, like anything, I think you just have to. But like full credit, they went out and won all those games.
100%. No, you're not being a downer.
Now let's see what they do on the road. I'm actually curious. I mean, the other thing is when you have that much success, like, how do you keep it going?
That's something people wonder every single day.
Right. Well, things are bound to go wrong. Like their power play is 40%. That's a roughly accurate stat.
Yeah, that's not like
hard to imagine that continuing. But
yeah,
their 5-on-5 play has also been good. So let's see where they're at in December 1st.
We will keep track of that. You did mention Hockey Hall of Fame weekend. Big induction class this year. Shea Weber, Pavel Datsyuk, David Poyle, Jeremy Roenick, Natalie Darwitz, Chrissy Wendell, Colin Campbell. Thoughts on them being celebrated this weekend? And of course, Scott Burnside also being acknowledged as well for the Elmer Ferguson Award.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the one closest to my heart just because Scott was one of my mentors growing up. In fact, I counted among my I got a few good bounces when I was young, but one of them was I got to cover some games in the 2002 Stanley Cup playoffs in Toronto.
Wow.
And Scott, and I was naturally thrilled. I was a young kid to be there covering games, and I got sat beside Scott in the press box. And, at the time, he was between jobs. He'd worked for the National Post, and they'd laid him off. And I should have asked him last night. I saw him at Pierre LeBrun's house. But he was freelancing for someone in the U.S. I don't know if it was like the New York Times or USA Today or someone at the time, but that's why he got sat in this weird press box seat where he wouldn't normally be, but he was beside me. And, we went out for a drink after a game and just, ended up becoming friends. And, he's, as I said, I counted among the lucky things that happened to me because I was at an age I could use some good mentors and couldn't find many better than him. So that's my first thought on the Hall of Fame class is just, I know the reporters aren't technically in the hall. I think, it's sort of like hall adjacent.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool seeing someone you know so well get that honor and, his family's up here and met his parents last night. Like it's, no one has, that's what's cool about the Hall of Fame in general is like no one would ever get that kind of achievement in their career without it. It's like a family success sort of. And, we saw that even on Friday. I was at the ring ceremony there and like even Jeremy Roenick, right. Who's, known for his gift of gab, we'll call it. You could just see how genuinely moved he was. Cause I think he waited 12 years, I want to say.
He waited a while.
I think it was 12 years where he was eligible.
Yeah.
And he actually said that he had sort of finally started to think he just wasn't going to happen for him. And so he was in a Starbucks drive-thru when he got the call, and he said he like started crying in his drive-thru.
Oh, okay.
And like didn't know what to say, when he got that call. So, I don't know all the players. I mean, Datsyuk speaks for himself. He's like the guy I think most NHL players that are of a certain age talk about like wanting, like he was like he was in the early days of YouTube. He was like one of the first YouTube hockey players. I think Patrick Kane kind of falls in that sort of category for a certain generation of player that they remember as kids,
right?
Looking up his highlights. But I mean, Datsyuk had so many ridiculous highlights because of his stick and his sort of defensive capabilities. Shea Weber, I think of him shooting the puck through the net at the Olympics. It kind of embodies what he is, right? He's such a big physical guy, had a bomb of a shot. I think he didn't put up the point totals that today's top defensemen do, but it's underrated how many goals he scored. I think he had a couple 20-goal seasons in his career, which obviously for a defenseman is pretty lofty stuff. And when I think of Roenick, honestly, I think he was a star when I was a kid.
Yeah.
He was all flash. As I said, he had the gift of gab. He was always saying something controversial, getting into it with Patrick Waugh.
Yeah, the back and forth with Patrick Waugh stands out to me.
In the playoffs. And I mean, he even said some things that got him in trouble.
Yeah, he said a lot of things that got him in trouble.
Yeah. But he was a showman in a sense. He was never afraid to put himself out there. And so, yeah, I think it's an interesting class. And I'm looking forward to the speeches tonight. They're trying to keep everyone short. So let's see if JR can keep it short.
Oh, define short, like 5 minutes?
I think 5 minutes or 7 minutes. Or something like that, yeah.
Interesting.
But there's already been a lot of conjecture about like whether they're actually going to be able to keep the speeches that short. So
that's very interesting.
I mean, I could see both sides of it. You do get to that moment, you probably feel like you have a lot of people to thank.
Yeah.
And you might want to be entertaining too. You might want to tell a story or two that.
Do they have to get the censors on for Jeremy Roenick?
I don't know.
That's
That's one thing I'll be watching for.
for sure. I want to point out the fact that both Shea Weber and David Poile are going in at the same time. I mean, pretty rare to see a general manager, a longtime executive, get in at the same time as a big cornerstone player that's been a part of a lot of the successful teams they had. And on top of that, the fact that David Poile traded Shea Weber the way that they did in obviously the much infamous Subban Weber trade. I thought that was really interesting. Also the offer sheet thing too. Like there's a lot of history between those two men.
Yeah, David Poile's getting tired of those questions this weekend.
Oh, really?
Oh, I mean, naturally. It was an emotional. I'm sure in his career it was that might be one of the biggest trades he ever made. Now I know he also traded like for Rod Langway 10 days into his first job as a GM, defenseman that would win a Norris Trophy. But the whole thing with Weber really started, predating the offer sheet.
Right.
When he went out and, they not only did he sign an offer sheet with Philadelphia, they put $26 million in the first basically year and a day of the contract, which at the time the thought was Nashville couldn't match that they wouldn't have the cash flow to do so. And they ultimately did. And, the way I heard David Poile describe it actually the other day was he said that we have a shared history. This is part of both of our stories, all this stuff. And it certainly sounds like now there's no hard feelings and they've talked it out. And, he even hinted, actually, I don't know more about it than this, that Shea Weber might be taking some kind of role with the Predators at some point here in the near future. But he didn't get more specific than that, but he kind of said that they'd be back together again sometime here soon. So, look, it's part of the business, right? Two of these players, one of them being Weber, one being Datsuk, they ended their careers as on the Coyotes cap sheet too.
Yes, they did.
Well, actually, Shea Weber's still going, so he's in Utah now.
I was about to ask, how does that work out where Shea Weber hasn't formally retired, but he's still Hockey Hall of Fame eligible? And
well, they did this with Chris Pronger.
Yager isn't in.
Well, because it's two different things, right? They did this with Pronger too. His career is unquestionably over. The Hall's view is this. They don't like the idea of someone potentially being enshrined in the Hall of Fame and then returning to play. And it's happened in history, Gordie Howe, and it's happened a couple of times. I think Mario Lemieux, when he came back.
Did Fleur do that?
I
don't remember if he did.
He obviously came back after, but I don't know if he got in the Hall in the meantime. But so that's why there's a 3-year window. Is basically the view of the Hall is if you stop playing professional hockey for 3 years, the odds of you coming back are pretty low.
Right.
And so they just want to acknowledge the player when he's done or she's done. And so Yager's not done, right? That's the whole point is he's still playing. He says it's his last year over in Czechia. We'll see if that's indeed the case. Into his 52, I think now. Jeez. My goodness. But in Shea Weber's case, he's just physically unable to play, and he's missed the 3 seasons now, and he can get in. So that's the distinction. They don't care about your contractual status; they care about when you're done as a player. And Shea actually said he actually can't turn on his one ankle, basically.
Oh my God!
He goes on the ice with his kids, but he said he's got to take big elaborate turns in one direction. He can't turn both ways because of his ankle issues.
That cup run in 2021, he gave everything. Everything. That was the best he had ever played as a member of the Montreal Canadiens. I felt like up until that point with him as a player, obviously he commanded the respect in the locker room with everything he had gone through as a player, obviously being an Olympian. This is a guy obviously people respected heavily in Montreal. But I think for his play, and I think especially from fans too, probably still reeling from that trade, that 2021 run, I think, earned everyone's respect. Already they probably had it, but just tenfold with the fact that he put his body on the line and played his absolute best hockey as a Montreal Canadian.
He listed the injuries the other day. It was crazy. I don't even have the ball, but he had a thumb and
something.
He said he was wrapped up like a mummy to play.
Yes.
He had a torn groin too. Someone actually asked him what was your injury. He's like, what wasn't injured was what he said. And you look back at that now for both him and Carey Price, and really was effectively the end of Carey's career too.
Yep.
I know he's played a few games since, but the stakes were so high for those guys in that final. It was such a weird time, still kind of COVID-y.
Yeah.
Going from the games in Tampa, which are sold out with full building, and then back to Montreal. I don't know what the number was, but it was not
a full barn at all.
No, it wasn't allowed to be, right? Because
correct.
of the government regulation. It wasn't because the Canadians fans weren't buying tickets for a cup final.
They would have been there, but yeah, government regulations.
It just was a strange time, but those guys were gutting through what they were to try to win, and unfortunately didn't get there for them. Not that I had a rooting interest in that. I'm just saying, players with those kind of careers, you can appreciate how much was really on the line for them in that cup final.
For sure. And Carey Price will get into the Hall of Fame too.
Yeah, probably next year. I think he's eligible next year, no?
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize that. Next year? Wow.
Might be 2 years. Anyway,
I would still assume, like that's I mean, I've always thought this. Carey Price has an easier time making it into the Hockey Hall of Fame than he would having his number retired. He absolutely does.
I mean, how many Vezinas did he win?
Off top,
he won the Vezina and the Hall.
He won the Vezina and the Hart the same year,
2015, I think.
I mean, you look through his career, you can say Carey Price was the best goaltender in the world for a sustained amount of time. That I think is undisputed.
Yeah,
my whole thing is just
how good he was at Sochi helps. I mean,
100%
obviously
too.
Won World Junior. Like his international record is sparkling.
Absolutely. So yeah, just the one Vezina, the Hart Trophy. He's got a Jennings. He's got a Pearson too. That 2014-2015 year.
Yeah,
that's
so
his
he'll be
year.
First ballot. Is kind of my point.
100%. My whole thing is just like he has an incredible resume for just as a guy and for his time in the league. And then you look at the standard that's been raised for the Montreal Canadiens in terms of having your number retired. I think he'd be the first player without a cup to have their number retired like that.
So maybe he won't.
That's my point.
I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's it. That's my point. He'd have an easier time getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is a pinnacle for most people.
Well, when you play for an organization with 24 cups, is it, or 25?
24.
24.
No 25.
I mean,
one day maybe.
It's like
Who knows?
It's like playing for the Yankees.
It's basically it's basically like playing for the Yankees. Do we touch? I mean, Pavel Datsyuk. I didn't get to say my piece on Pavel Datsyuk. What a guy! He basically. You mentioned the YouTube era that he was in. He's like the NHL, the closest thing at the time when he was playing. He was like the NHL's closest thing to basketball players having and one mixtapes.
Right.
Basically, like for those who are not familiar, like you have those like players who have their own like highlight reels, and there was the company and one, like the basketball outfitter, and they'd have all these different players like doing all these like sick handles and tricks and stuff. Pavel Datsyuk, it was like watching him play. The deeks, the shootout moves. He was this incredible force on the ice, and obviously he has the success that makes him a Hall of Famer. Like he's just this incredible player, and it's great that he's getting celebrated. And
he has kind of a sneaky sense of humor.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, like it's very dry. Like you almost because he's a quiet talker.
Yeah.
So you have to like listen for it, but like he delivered a few one-liners that were pretty good over the weekend. Even when they mentioned a reverse hit he'd thrown on Shea Weber where he knocked him to the ground. And they asked him what he remembered. He goes, "Oh, I think just it was the bad ice in Nashville." Basically why Shea fell. So yeah, I mean that's what I mean. I think the Hall of Fame weekend's great.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like a family reunion. A lot of people I just see this one weekend of the year. It's fun. So I'm looking forward to it tonight.
Yeah, for sure. And in regards to the rest of the class too, Chrissy Wendell-Pohl and Natalie Darwitz as well. I had mentioned David Poyle, Jimmy Roenick, and Colin Campbell in that too. But yeah, a very star-studded class for this year's induction. Really cool.
And Scott Burnside.
Put
some respect on his name.
Have to put respect on him. I joined The Athletic kind of near the end of his time there, but he was always really great to me, and he deserves this honor.
Well, what he's known for, quite honestly, is the way he treated new people, younger people in the industry. Like he set the standard for making sure everyone was involved, and like if you're covering a playoff series with him, hey, we're going here tonight, like, make sure you come. Like he was very inclusive, and I think there's an important lesson in that. No matter what you do, no matter what sort of industry you're in, that I feel like he was always passing it on, and now he's got hundreds of people saying nice things about him because that's just the kind of guy he was.
How important was that day getting to sit next to him in that press box in 2002?
Well, I couldn't have known it at the time. I know it now that it was immensely important because he became a good friend, and and it wasn't just that he's a good friend. It's like I would then be out covering events with him, and I'm seeing like how he does his job. I'm reading. I'll cover the same story as him, and then I got to read his the next day. I'm like, oh my God, that's so much better. It's so much better than what I did. But like, but all that it keeps you striving and it keeps you improving your own work. And like that's how I just think that's how it works, frankly, is you get around people that are better than you and it brings something in you where you want to be better. And so, like who knows, like if I don't meet him, like I can't walk back through the other door where I didn't meet Scott early in my career and he wasn't that great to me and wasn't, so inviting and making me feel welcome. I mean, that was the other thing. It's what I remember from being young, because I wanted to do this so badly, is that I just always wanted to sort of feel like I was part of it at the beginning. And that's what Scott was really good at. He would just invite me out and I would just sit there with all these guys that are much, higher standing in the industry and hear their stories and but he made me feel part of the club, even though I really hadn't done anything to earn it at that point. And so, I think there's a lot of value in that, because it just gave me time to find myself essentially within that. And, I'm really grateful. Him and Pierre LeBrun are two of my bigger, lucky, I call them mentors. The other part of it too, though, is I have to say, because there was some older faces at this party we were at last night, some, reporters that had retired 10 plus years ago. And because I was extremely young in the press box at the beginning. I was 19 or 20 when I first started coming around. All of the legendary writers were actually really nice to me. They didn't all like each other and they had their own beefs and stuff. It was a little different time. I feel like it's a little more collegial nowadays, but they were all great to me, which is, there's something to be said for that. It was an industry that looked after itself a little bit.
Yeah. That's really well said. That's awesome. And it just the whole time you were talking about that, I also thought about the fact that I've had pretty good experiences being around media colleagues such as yourselves. And I would put you and I think Arpin as well, and a bit of Marc-Antoine Godin, kind of that same category of mentors who kind of opened doors and let me be into. There's a lot of people I would add in that as well. But it's cool that someone like Scott Burnside was able to do that for you. And because of that, I would like to think people like you have been able to do that for other younger people coming in. And obviously there should be more ways to get more people in this space, but it's been cool to know that the people who are there, at least in my experience, it's not for everybody, but at least in my experience, that has been passed down to future generations who cover the sport.
Yeah, and he's his work was also top drawer.
100%.
I haven't even top.
We haven't even got in on his articles or anything like that.
No, but I'm just saying he was always. There's a few over my time. I remember Cam Cole. My goodness, you just hated when you were writing the same story as Cam Cole, because there was no way you were writing it better than him. It was impossible. And so Scott, I feel when you were on a big event, you're oh man, I'm gonna get my butt whipped by him again. But obviously he didn't think of it that way. But that's how it looked. And so anyway, I'm just I'm feeling a little reflective, I guess, today after hanging out with everyone last night.
I appreciate that. I want to get to your own Ask CJ that you did last week. There's 3 topics that came up that I wanted to touch on. If there's other stuff you want to bring up as well when we talk about it. All right, cool.
I wrote that 5 days ago. I already forget what's in there.
I thought with Kirill Kaprizov, who has been exceptional with the Minnesota Wild to start off the year, someone had asked the question, how much money is he going to make when he's a UFA? I think in 2026, he's going to make over $14 million. Why? You seem to be taking the over on that.
Yeah. They asked over under $14 million.
Yes.
Obviously referencing Leon Draisaitl's, starting next season, the highest contract in the league per season. And I'm smashing the over just because of the factors at play here. Kaprizov, it helps he's having this awesome season. It helps that the owner of the Minnesota Wild, Craig Leopold, has already done a media avail in which he said they will not be outbid for his services. Mm-hmm. Basically said we are paying him top dollar. And he's in a rising cap environment. And the Wild, think of their franchise. They've never had a superstar of this level, ever.
No.
So I just think everything is set up here. He could not possibly have more leverage. He has the right to become an unrestricted free agent, meaning he could walk out the door in 2026 if he wanted. So in order to keep him, they're going to have to compel him to sign. They've said they're going to sign him at the absolute top of the market. The cap is going up at least, another 5%, I would think, next season. So you're looking at 92.5 next year, something like $97 million the year after. Of course, there's a CBA negotiation, so that could change depending on what formula they put into that document. But essentially, we're going to be about $100 million cap when he's going to sign this contract. I just don't see any way he doesn't become, at that time. Well, I should say, Connor McDavid is also up that summer. So I was about to say he's going to become the highest paid player at that time, but depending on the timing of when McDavid signs,
It might be 5 minutes.
I think it's safe to say ultimately when the dust settles, McDavid will be the top paid player, but I think they're both going over $14 million. And I don't see any way around it for Minnesota's end of things. I think they have to keep him, and I think he's going to cost more than Draisaitl.
Wouldn't it be interesting if with both of those guys, I mean, I'm sure their extensions, I guess, would deal with it. I don't know, but it would just be in a fun world where like both camps are kind of looking at each other being like, all right, like if this guy goes first, then we definitely want more than him. Because if you're Kirill Kaprizov and you see Connor McDavid making more money, yeah, sure, fine. He's the best player in the world. But if you have all that leverage, why not ask for the same stratosphere so that way you just play up all into your leverage?
Sure. Well, I think the most interesting thing, and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
We very much are, but I don't care.
But the most interesting thing to me is that the CBA expires September 2026. Because if you're either player, do you really want to sign your next extension? And I'm not suggesting either's going to leave Minnesota or Edmonton, but I'm not sure I'd want to sign that extension without knowing what the next CBA is.
Big brain. That is big brain.
But I'm saying
yes.
But the truth is they'll both be eligible to sign their extension as of this summer, 2025. It's, I'm optimistic CBA talks will be smooth, but I'm not so optimistic that it'll be done this summer, like a year ahead of time. And so if the CBA isn't clarified this summer, they might both want to wait. Again, not because they're trying to leverage their team. Like you don't even know what the system is. Like what happens if in the next CBA, and now I'm really just pie in the skying it, they come up with like an exceptional player rule or something, or a franchise tag, or however you want to apply it.
A designated player rule.
Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but there could be a rule where you can have one player that makes like that something that doesn't count against the cap or something. And so, or, again, I'm sure the NHL might listen to this and be like, what are you talking about, Johnson? We're never giving that.
If the NHL is listening to this.
But
hey, NHL.
Right. I'm merely pointing out, though, that you probably want to know what the rules are of the system you're signing up for.
1,000%.
Even the way they structure the contract year by year, maybe there's going to be escrow caps and they're going to want to have the most money in year 3 of that deal because, it's a long way of saying I don't know if either Kaprizov or McDavid signs this summer coming up. Not because they're trying to force their way out of their team, but they probably want more information before signing that next deal.
I mean, it would make sense, right? And I'm glad you brought that up because I think if anyone was in that same situation, they'd think the same thing too. What if by some miracle in the next CBA, there is some dang-fangled way where Apple or Amazon is for sure going to throw billions of dollars and you could find yourself in a situation where the NHL is no longer be a gate-driven league and it's going to be off of TV or streaming revenue. Again, we're just throwing out random examples here, but if you're McDavid and you're Kaprizov and you're like, well, I could stand to make $25 million per year as a cap hit instead of 15, 16, you wait. You should wait. And especially in those two players, they can afford to wait.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only risk to them is injury or something in the following season.
100%.
But I'm just guessing now that both are probably.
I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. But I mean, it also makes sense to sign a $100 million guaranteed contract too.
That's true.
So like there is a world where Minnesota puts something in front of Kaprizov where he does sign this summer and he's just like, you know what? I'll live with that next CBA. Because that's a lot of guaranteed money.
That is very true. I do love the fact that we let our brains go there. I want to bring up Trevor Zegras. It's a player who there's been a lot of trade rumors around him for a little bit, but it's not as if his value has been all that high. What's the latest on him?
Well, his point total isn't that high to start this year either, but it does sound like the Ducks are pretty happy with him and that they've, maybe some of the things that they've questioned him in the past, whether it's just, habits, defensive attention to detail, things like that have been there. And so I'm not certainly saying he won't be traded, but I don't think he's not going to be up at the top of the trade board whenever it gets dusted off because I do think that the atmosphere has shifted a little bit around him. And I just say it's sort of a wait and see at where this ends up because it's only whatever. Go back to our Jets discussion. We're still in the early portion of the season, but the early portion of the season, the results have been pretty good. And again, that's saying that where his, if you just call him up on HockeyDB, it doesn't look like he's having a great year. But I would say he's not front and center on the trade block. I mean, they have guys like Cam Fowler coming up to the end of a contract, who I think they'd look to move.
Yeah.
Still wonder about a John Gibson trade at some point. I mean, he's only getting up and running after missing time. But, it doesn't seem like Zegras is at the top of the list for Anaheim these days.
If you were one of the 32 NHL GMs, would you have interest in Trevor Zegras as a player, considering where he's at this point in his career?
Well, of course. I mean, I think there's teams there's teams that want to get established players that aren't prospects anymore, that aren't draft picks, but that are still pretty young, right? Is Zegras 22, 23?
Still a pretty young player.
Point is, he's not fully formed, whatever he is. Last year was difficult. He had that ankle injury and everything. But yeah, I certainly think he would have appeal. It's just, like anything, comes down to cost and where it is. But like, I think this is another way to reframe it. If I'm sitting here, I think his best NHL season is still in the future, not in the past. So
he's 23 years old.
Yeah. So I think he would be an appealing player to go get, but it doesn't sound like he's available. So, I mean, everyone's available at a certain price, but I don't think it's a priority. I do think the Ducks are focused on just seeing where this goes.
All right. What about the Leafs? We didn't really do like a Leafs corner, but are they actually in the market for a third line center? I know we've mentioned them as a team that should be looking out for trades when it comes to their defensive situation, but what about for a center?
Well, I think long range, that's a possibility. That was a question from a reader. I'm not going to sit here and say 100% that's what they're going to do, because I think, first of all, there's a lot of time between now and March 7th, the trade deadline. Maybe an injury or something else, pops up. Unfortunately, Max Pacioretty got injured over the weekend. I'm just using that as an example. Like, you can have a plan and then all of a sudden things start to change depending on, where your lineup needs come from. But, I think that's certainly a possibility for them to strengthen themselves down the middle. Especially in a world, we've seen it. They actually won the games without Austin Matthews, but when Austin Matthews gets injured, it forces Max Domi into the middle. Then you're leaning on John Tavares at age 34 as your second line center. They have Pontus Holmberg and David Kampf. But, I think it's an area where they feel they can probably make some improvements. But it doesn't mean that it's 100% going to happen. And I think it's a little premature, but fans love it was a reader question, and so I answered it as best I could. I think that it's probably where I'd say it's most likely. I mean, I think they feel good about where their blue line's at after the remodeling they did in the summertime. They got some wingers who can score, and so I just think it's natural and the goaltending's been really good. If you're looking for an upgrade, it's probably down the middle.
Do we have an update on Max Pacioretty's injury situation?
I just heard that it's going to be a while. I don't know the specifics, and I don't have a firm timeline. It's probably going to come out today or tomorrow. But doesn't sound like a short-term injury for him. Okay. Unfortunately. Didn't look good.
Yeah, it did not look good. Let's get 2 questions for our own Ask CJ.
All right.
The real Ask CJ.
Let it fly.
Yeah, of course. From Chasing the Cup, should Logan Thompson be on Team Canada for 4 Nations?
I mean, he's in the conversation. Washington's had such a nice start to the year. I think it's natural. I mean, look, St. Louis has been tagged for 2 8-1 losses in the last week. It's been a tough time for goaltenders, frankly. I think Jordan Binnington, though, I'm fairly confident will be one of the goalies. Aiden Hill probably is there as well. And then choose your own adventure. Logan Thompson, Darcy Kemper, help me out here. Sam Montembeault.
Sam Montembeault, I don't think his stock is as high right now.
It's someone from there, though. The one thing that we have to keep in mind, especially if you do have Binnington and Hill at minimum as 2 of them, obviously Stuart Skinner could be in that conversation. Yeah, you have to count
Skinner in that conversation.
The thing is with those guys, obviously these aren't the bona fide Hall of Famers that Canada has put out historically in best on best.
No.
But they've both won Stanley Cups behind good teams, great teams. And what's Canada going to be in terms of the skaters? A good to great team that doesn't make a lot of mistakes you wouldn't expect, doesn't have a lot of breakdowns. And those players have shown that they are good enough to win behind teams of that caliber. And so I as much as it is definitely a worry, I'm not trying to put any positive spin on it at all, but I do think it might end up there's so much focus on it, it might end up getting overstated. Because, the U.S. has 3 awesome goalies, but you can only play 1 a game. And if they're playing 2 in a game, something bad's happened. Yeah. It's certainly an advantage, but it's not nearly as big of an advantage as it looks when we do those rosters and you line them up, because you have to make decisions in that moment and you're only playing 1 guy. So that's a long way of saying Logan Thompson's had a really good start to the year. I think he's a good enough goalie and wouldn't surprise me. I talked to someone who's a bit more of a goalie expert than me, a lot more of a goalie expert than me, and he was making a case for Marc-Andre Fleury as a number 3. He just thinks he's the right personality for that role. Obviously is been internationally. He was with Team Canada in 2010, if you believe it, at the Vancouver Olympics. It's the last season of his career that maybe there'd be It's not that it would be ceremonial, but that he could be a positive team guy for Canada. So there's even been a vote from the goalie community for Marc-Andre Fleury in that spot.
I wouldn't hate him at that spot, especially, I mean, he's not the same goalie as he was before, but he at least has experience playing, being with Team Canada International.
Right. I think you make the argument, though, you probably want to bring a younger goalie in the number 3 spot who might be part of, the next year at the
future,
Olympics.
yeah.
Especially, 2026. Like, just to introduce that person to what it is to play for Hockey Canada. Like Logan Thompson would be an example. He's on the younger side. Did he ever play at the World Juniors? I don't recall.
It's not a name that stands out to me right away.
And so my point would be, for example, if they like him, maybe it makes sense to just introduce him to what it is to be part of that team. Because while we don't know who's starting this year, we certainly don't know who's starting the Olympic tournament. And that's, the Four Nations is an interesting turn. Like, I'm excited for it. I really am. But the Olympics is the real deal.
For sure. Not at a World Juniors, but he did play at a World Championship with Canada in 2022. Silver medalist out of that. You mentioned the Blues. Adam Rubino asked, with the Blues losing 8-1 twice in the span of a week, can you see them making a big change? Kind of tough for them with all the injuries they've piled up, right?
Yeah, I don't see a big change. I mean, there's a lot of tough talk out of their locker room. Obviously, it's every team lets a game get away from you, but when you have 2 in short succession that go the way those 2 games went, I'll look to see the response. But I don't see a big change coming there. I really we it's almost like we have a checklist when a team's struggling, right? It's like coach. It's like, well,
players, okay.
No, but they fired Craig Berube last year.
They did, and they're down to Drew Bannister.
Right, but he was an interim basis. They chose to keep him. I mean, are you going to then fire him 16, 20 games into another season?
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't make sense to me. So that's not logical. You're right. They have tons of injuries, and especially at key positions. Robert Thomas, most notable among them. So I just think you got to weather through it. And, I mean, if it continues, let's revisit that. But I don't think just yet.
Okay. From Corey Oliver, why isn't Alexander McGillney in the Hockey Hall of Fame? Do you think he should be there?
Yeah.
Over 1,000 points in 990 games.
I don't understand it. I mean, for a time, I thought maybe it's just the whole Russian factor and where the world's at geopolitically. But then we've just seen Pavel Datsyuk inducted to the Hall of Fame as part of this class as a Russian. So I don't have an answer. It's the truth. I mean, there's no. He ticks every box. He literally was a superstar player. He was an exciting player, one of the first players to defect, and he has historical significance even just in his path to the league. He has international success. It makes no sense. There's no logical reason that I can see, but we don't. With the Hall of Fame, we're all guessing.
Yeah,
there's 18 members of the selection committee. You have to get 14 yes votes or 14 pro votes, and he obviously hasn't gotten 14 out of 18. But I don't know why, because they're not allowed to talk about it.
If you had a vote, would you give him a vote?
Yes. No, to me, he's the biggest. He's the one I just don't understand. It was like I didn't understand why they didn't put Pat Burns in while he was still alive. Like I didn't. It's like on that level. Like we're like I don't see an argument against him. Like, and I'm always willing to listen to someone else's argument, but I don't see where the no is on McGillney. Like it doesn't compute. The guy scored 76 goals in a season. But also spent a long time in the NHL. Like I just read Matt Sundin's book. I know I've referenced it a few times. He called McGillney the greatest teammate he ever had, or the most skilled teammate he ever had. Matt Sundin led the Leafs in scoring all but one of his years with the Leafs. The one year he didn't, it was Alexander McGillney. I mean, I'm just saying he had longevity. He's got an interesting story. He had international success. I don't get it. As I said, I thought it might be the Russia thing, but now we've seen another Russian inducted, so I don't really know what's going on there.
Okay, 2 more for you. One from Dean. Do you think the Leafs will immediately put Austin Matthews back on PP1 when he returns?
Yes.
Very, very, very quick. A lot of people are wondering if he's PP2 now.
I mean,
come on. It's Austin Matthews.
I get that we want to galaxy brain it, but come on. Like this doesn't even need, I appreciate the question, but it doesn't even need a breakdown. I mean, there's no chance he's not on their top power play unit.
All right.
For the rest of time, frankly.
Right. Here's this last one for you from Daniel Burt. Start, bench, cut. Burritos, tacos, nachos. We would get a food question.
Start, bench, cut.
Yes.
Burritos. It's funny. I don't have a big distinction between burritos and tacos. Like it feels, and I guess nachos.
I mean, it's a pretty big distinction. You're either getting like the shell taco, or I guess you could have like the
but like it's
one.
basically the
But
same ingredients.
Yeah, but it's just how you consume it.
I'm gonna cut nachos.
Okay.
I'm going to start burritos.
Okay. All right.
And so that means I bench.
So you would bench tacos?
Yes.
Okay. I would. Oh God. You know what?
Do you know what it's all based on though? I don't like getting food on my hands.
Okay.
And so the burrito in my mind is like the cleanest of those to eat. Like in terms of it's not going to be all over me.
I mean, that depends on how you eat it and how packed the burrito is.
Right. But I'm just letting you in on my thinking there.
I appreciate
it's like, it's not that I don't like nachos, but it's just kind of gross. It's all over your hands.
Depends on how you eat your nachos too. I'm very much like with nachos. All right, you can have like the casual ones and all that, and you put your cheese in there. But like I like your ground beef or whatever meat you're gonna put on top of there, and it's like loaded and stacked. Like I love nachos like that. But I think I would end up cutting them too.
All right.
I think I cut them, and I think
it's like the first food question where we haven't ended up at just polar opposites, basically.
But I think I would start tacos and I'd bench burritos, because more often than not, with a burrito, as packed as they are, as great as they are, there's only been so many times I've really enjoyed a burrito to the point where like I'm completely satisfied and I'm knocked out for the rest of the day. And I think I'd rather just have like a burrito bowl. Whereas a taco, you have it in this like
Too
really
messy.
Awesome shell.
Too messy.
Nah,
you have a bite and it's all over you. And
I mean, you don't overload your taco. That way none of the ingredients fall out onto your hands. That's how you do it. You could have like 3 or 4 of them, so that way you don't have to like load just one.
Chicken wings really confound me because I love the taste of them, but my messiness quotient, like it really makes me, it's like Chris versus Chris. On one hand, Chris wants his hands clean. On the other hand, Chris wants to eat this chicken.
I'm very much a guy who I like dry rub chicken wings because I could just dip them in barbecue sauce and I could eat them. But I'm with you there. I don't like getting my hands dirty, but I think with tacos, there's a way to do it where it doesn't happen. That's why I'm going to start tacos. All right, that's going to do it for our Monday edition of the CJ Show. We'll be back on Thursday with a brand new episode of Our Fine Show. Well done as always, Siege.
Thanks, buddy. Great to see you.
Likewise, my man. Subscribe to the podcast, and we'll be back soon. Peace.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.